too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. There's something I've never really said out loud. Something I didn't want to admit, even to myself. But maybe you felt it too. That quiet, sinking feeling when you realize someone you care about just doesn't see you. Like you're showing up again and again, offering your time, your care, your heart. And it's like throwing everything into a black hole. No warmth coming back. No hecho. Just silence. At first, I told myself I was overthinking. That I was too sensitive. That maybe they were just busy or tired or going through something I didn't understand. So I kept showing up. I kept texting first. I asked how their day was. I remembered little things they told me. I made time, adjusted plans, gave second chances. And it wasn't even about romantic love. It could be friends, family, anyone really. The kind of people who smile at you when they need something, but disappear the moment you need them. There's this one memory that still stings a little. I was going through a rough week. One of those weeks where you're just holding yourself together with threads. And I finally reached out to someone I consider close. I said, hey, I could really use some company or even just a chat. They left me on read for days. But the moment they needed advice about something completely unrelated, boom, I was the first person they messaged. Like nothing had happened. And I still answered. That's what broke me a little inside. I still answered. I think a lot of us do that. We want to be there. We want to be kind. We want to believe that our care will be enough to earn someone's love or attention. That if we just give a little more, try a little harder, they'll finally see us. Finally choose us. But what if they never asked for that love in the first place? What if they were just fine taking, and we were the ones pouring from a cup that never refills? I didn't want to accept that. I didn't want to believe that maybe I meant less to someone than they meant to me. That maybe I was just convenient. That maybe my presence didn't light anything up in them. It just filled a temporary need. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also taught me something. That kind of quiet heartbreak. The one where you're not really rejected, just neglected. It has a way of getting under your skin. It makes you question your worth in the most subtle, sneaky ways. It's not like a dramatic breakup or a screaming fight. It's the absence, the emptiness, the lack of effort. And because there's no big moment, no clear closure, you keep hoping. You keep trying. You stay. And every time you do, you shrink just a little more. It took me a long time to understand that this dynamic, this unspoken agreement where one gives and the other takes, isn't just about them. It reflects something inside us too, a part of us that's scared to stop giving. Because what if, underneath all that effort, we're not lovable without it? What if silence is all that waits for us when we stop trying? I think we chase connection so desperately sometimes because we're terrified of what happens if we stop. If we don't text first, if we don't offer help, if we don't stay useful, will anyone show up for us then? And the fear of that answer keeps us trapped. So, no, I'm not here to blame anyone. People are who they are. Some are incapable of reciprocity. Some are emotionally unavailable. Some are just careless with hearts that aren't their own. But I'm here to say, the moment I started noticing these patterns, the moment I stopped brushing them off as not a big deal, something inside me started to wake up. It was like peeling off a mask I didn't know I was wearing. One made of 4 smiles, and it's fine, and pretending I didn't mind. I did mind. I do mind. And I think if you're still reading this, maybe a part of you does too. So if you've ever found yourself sitting in that silence, waiting for someone to care as much as you do, I just want you to know you're not crazy. You're not needy. You're not too much. You're just someone who feels deeply in a world that sometimes forgets how to. And maybe, just maybe, it's not about getting them to see you. Maybe it's about finally seeing yourself. There was a moment, I don't even remember exactly when, but it changed how I looked at everything. It was late. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, And I just kept asking myself, why do I keep ending up in the same kind of relationships? Why do I always feel like I care more, like I give more, like I try harder? And the scariest thought slipped in. What if it's not about them? What if it's something in me? That realization didn't come with fireworks or some big revelation. It was more like a soft, heavy sigh from somewhere deep inside. Like my soul was tired of pretending it didn't know the answer. I started replaying moments in my head. Conversations where I felt invisible, times I stayed silent when I should have spoken up, the way I always brushed off being dismissed like it was nothing. And what hit me hardest was that it wasn't just bad luck or meeting the wrong people. It was a pattern, and I was part of it. People were treating me the way I allowed them to treat me. That's when I started seeing it. The mirror, every interaction, every moment I felt undervalued or unseen was reflecting something back to me. Something painful, something honest. I realized that deep down, I didn't fully believe I was worthy of being chosen, respected, loved without conditions. I thought I had to earn it, perform for it, be useful for it. It wasn't something I consciously believed, but it showed up in how I lived, in who I gravitated toward, and what I tolerated. And suddenly, it made sense why I kept finding myself in situations where I felt disposable. I was searching for proof that I mattered from people who were never going to give it. I think Carl Jung was right. The outer world reflects the inner world. And until we recognize what's going on inside, we keep attracting the same lessons outside. That was hard to admit, because it meant I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. I was co-creating my own suffering. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but out of old wounds, quiet insecurities, and unexamined beliefs. Somewhere along the line, I'd accepted a version of myself that wasn't whole. And because I believed it, others responded to it. You know how they say people will treat you how you let them? It's not just about setting boundaries. It's about energy. It's about how you show up in the world. When you believe you're valuable, your presence shifts. You move differently. You don't beg to be seen. You don't chase. You don't tolerate crumbs. But to get there, I had to get real with myself. I had to ask some tough questions. Why do I feel so uncomfortable with silence from others? Why does being ignored feel like a personal failure? Why do I keep proving my worth to people who wouldn't notice if I disappeared? And one answer kept coming back, because I haven't fully seen myself yet. It's strange, isn't it? How we can show up for others over and over again, but not truly show up for ourselves. How we can be kind, forgiving, understanding to everyone else. But inside, we're criticizing ourselves, minimizing our needs, pretending our feelings don't matter. I started journaling. Not just the surface stuff, but the real, raw, messy thoughts. I asked myself what I believed about love, about connection, about my own value. I wrote until my hand cramped. I cried. I got angry. I felt ashamed. But somewhere in that mess, I started hearing my own voice. Not the scared, insecure one, but the one I'd buried. The one that said, hey, you've been through a lot. You're still standing. You still love deeply. You still hope. That means something. And I began to understand something else. The people who didn't value me, they weren't evil. They were just playing out their own scripts. Maybe they didn't know how to love. Maybe they were scared too. Maybe they were numb. But it wasn't my job to fix that. It was my job to stop handing my worth to people who didn't ask for it. To stop confusing their silence with a verdict on my value. To stop trying to convince anyone that I'm enough and start believing it myself. That shift didn't happen overnight. Some days I still fall into old habits. I still catch myself reaching out, hoping for something that never really existed. But I'm quicker to catch it now. Quicker to pause. Quicker to ask, is this love or is this longing? I think when you start seeing these patterns, it's like waking up. Things that used to feel normal, like chasing someone's attention or making excuses for their coldness, suddenly feel heavy, wrong, exhausting. And you start to crave something quieter, something steadier. Not fireworks, just warmth. Safety, reciprocity. You start to crave you. The parts of you that you lost trying to win someone else. That's the mirror. That's the beginning. There's a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It's the kind that creeps in quietly. It wears the mask of doubt, the whisper that says, maybe it's me. That's the kind of heartbreak Anya went through. And when she told me her story, I saw pieces of myself in every part of it. Anya met this guy who seemed perfect on paper. Smart, charming, successful, the kind of person who knows exactly how to say the right thing at the right time. She was drawn to him instantly. And in the beginning, it felt like magic. You know that feeling when someone makes you feel seen, wanted, chosen. Like maybe, just maybe, this time it's real. But little by little, the cracks began to show. She noticed she was always the one reaching out first, always initiating the conversations, always asking how his day was, remembering the things he liked, making the plans. At first, she brushed it off. He's just busy. He's got a lot on his plate. The excuses came easily, because when you want something to work, you'll find every reason not to look at what's really happening. She told herself he was just not a texting person, that maybe he showed love differently. She lowered her expectations just to keep the connection alive. That's the part that hurt to hear, not because she was wrong, but because I'd done the same. Shrinking yourself bit by bit, hoping they'll meet you halfway. Then one day, it all shattered. She found out he was married. Not just once, but twice before. For kids. 2 alimonies. A whole life she didn't know about. And he had been seeing her as if she were just a side character in his chaotic little world. When she told me, she laughed in that sad, hollow way people do when they're trying not to fall apart. I can't believe I didn't see it, she said. I feel so stupid. But she wasn't stupid. She was hopeful. She believed in the version of him he let her see. And I think we all do that sometimes. We fall in love with someone's potential, not their reality. What amazed me was what happened next. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't even try to confront him. She just stopped. Stopped texting. Stopped chasing. Stopped pouring her love into someone who had nothing real to give her in return. And then, of course, he started reaching out. Suddenly, he was checking in, sending messages, saying he missed her. But by then, something in her had shifted. That longing she used to feel, gone. That ache in her chest when he didn't respond, quiet. That desperate hope that he'd finally see her, burned out. Because the moment she chose herself, the illusion broke. She saw him for who he was, not the fantasy, but the truth. A man who fed off admiration, but offered nothing back. A man who had room for attention, but not love. A man who didn't value what she brought because he never had to work for it. It was like watching someone come back to life. She started doing little things that made her smile. Morning walks, reading poetry again, painting, something she hadn't done in years. She laughed more, stood taller. There was light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. And it wasn't because someone else gave it to her. It was because she stopped waiting for someone else to hand her the love she could give herself. She told me, the moment I stopped asking why he didn't choose me, I started choosing me. That stuck with me, because so many of us are out here waiting for someone to see us, love us, choose us, when all along we've been abandoning ourselves. And it's not about blaming ourselves for someone else's behavior. It's about realizing that healing starts the moment we stop negotiating our worth. Anya's story reminded me that sometimes what looks like rejection is actually redirection. That walking away from what hurts is not a loss. It's an opening, a return. And maybe that's the beginning of something sacred. When you stop begging to be loved and start remembering that you already are simply because you exist. I think one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and maybe you've been there too, is to admit the truth I didn't want to see. Not because I couldn't see it, but because seeing it meant I had to do something about it. And that meant letting go. Letting go of the story I had built in my head. Letting go of the potential. Letting go of the hope that maybe if I just held a little longer, they would finally come around. But they didn't. And the truth was right there all along. In the unanswered messages. In the conversations that felt one-sided. In the way I always walked away feeling emptier than before. I just didn't want to believe it. Because if I admitted it, really admitted it, I'd have to face the grief. Not just the grief of losing them, but the grief of losing the illusion. And that could be even harder. It's funny how we make excuses for people we care about. They're just going through a tough time. They're not good at expressing emotions. They're afraid of getting hurt. And maybe all of that is true. But here's the thing. Someone who wants to be in your life will show up for you. Maybe imperfectly, maybe awkwardly, but they'll show up. And if they don't, that's not confusion. That's clarity. It took me a long time to understand that love isn't ambiguous. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't make you feel like a burden. It doesn't demand that you prove your worth again and again. Love is steady. It's kind. It makes room for you. But in order to see that, you have to first stop lying to yourself. That was the hardest part, facing the quiet truth that I was holding on to something that only I was building, that I was watering a garden someone else had already abandoned. So I started doing this thing. I'd imagine a friend coming to me, telling me the exact story I was living, telling me about someone who didn't respond, didn't try, didn't care. And I'd ask myself, what would I say to them? You know what I always said? You deserve better. So why was it so hard to say that to myself? Because when it's your heart on the line, everything gets blurry. Your brain knows what's right, but your heart still wants to believe. You hold on to potential. You hold on to memories. You hold on to the feeling of almost. But almost isn't love. And slowly, I began to realize something that changed everything. Acceptance doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It means you're ready to stop fighting what is. I wasn't okay with how they treated me, but I could stop pretending it didn't hurt. I could stop acting like it was fine. I could stop trying to change someone who didn't want to change. There's a kind of peace that comes with that. A quiet exhale. A stillness. Not because everything is okay, but because you've stopped resisting the truth. And from there, something new starts to grow. A question began to surface in me. A real, honest question. If this is how someone treats me, why do I stay? Not out of judgment, not to beat myself up, but to understand, to get to the root. What was I really afraid of? I sat with that question, and what came up surprised me. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of what being alone meant, that I wasn't enough, that if this person didn't choose me, maybe no one would, that if I stopped trying, maybe it would confirm all the fears I kept buried deep. And yet, the longer I stayed in something that hurt, the more I was confirming those fears myself. I think we reach a turning point when we realize that staying is hurting us more than leaving ever could. That clinging to someone's indifference doesn't make them love you. It just makes you disappear little by little. So I let go. Not all at once. Not in some grand declaration. But slowly, gently. I stopped texting first. I stopped checking in. I stopped hoping they'd change. And I started listening to myself instead. It was painful. It felt like withdrawal. Like letting go of a drug I didn't realize I was addicted to. But in the silence that followed, I found something unexpected. Me, my voice, my needs, my strength. The parts of me I had quieted just to keep someone else close. And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel free. I think one of the bravest things we can ever do is sit face to face with the part of ourselves we usually try to hide. The part that's afraid, ashamed, insecure. The part we dress up with jokes, people-pleasing, overachieving. The part that says, if I'm not perfect, maybe I won't be loved. That's the shadow. And it took me a long time to even acknowledge that mine was there. I used to think I was just being strong. That if I could keep everything under control, if I could stay kind and giving, if I could never show too much need, I'd be safe. I'd be enough. But that wasn't strength. That was fear in disguise. When I finally asked myself, why do I keep allowing myself to be treated like I don't matter? The answer didn't come from my head. It came from a gut, raw and shaky. Because somewhere inside, I don't fully believe that I do. That wrecked me. It's not an easy thing to admit. That deep down, you've internalized a story that says you have to earn love. That just being you isn't enough. That if you're not constantly giving, performing, or fixing, you'll be forgotten. Rejected. Left behind. But when I look back, I started to see where that story came from. I thought about the times I was told to stop being sensitive, or when my feelings were dismissed as dramatic, or how I always felt the need to be the easy one, the peacemaker, the one who didn't cause trouble. That's how I survived. That's how I stayed connected. But it also taught me to abandon myself. And that abandonment didn't stop in childhood. It followed me into adulthood, into friendships, into love. Every time I ignored that sinking feeling in my chest, every time I said yes when I wanted to say no, Every time I waited for someone to choose me while putting myself last, I was reinforcing the same old wound. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And God, was he right? I thought I was just unlucky in love. But the truth was, I was reenacting the same inner wound over and over, hoping someone else would finally rewrite the ending. But that's not how healing works. So I started doing the work. I began asking the hard questions. Why am I so afraid to be alone? What part of me believes I deserve less than full, honest love? What do I think I'll lose if I let this person go? It wasn't about judging myself. It was about meeting the shadow with compassion, about holding my own hand and saying, "I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt, but you don't have to live from that pain anymore." I started journaling, writing letters to the parts of me that felt unworthy, letting the sadness come up instead of pushing it down. I let myself grieve, not just the person I lost, but the versions of me I had to become just to be loved. It was messy. It was exhausting, but it was real. And in those moments, something softened. I stopped needing to be perfect. I stopped needing to be liked. I stopped needing to fix what was never mine to fix. I realized that every time I chased after someone who didn't see me, I was really chasing after my own validation. I was trying to heal something inside by controlling something outside. But healing doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender. So I started surrendering to the discomfort, to the silence, to the fear that maybe I wasn't enough, and then to the truth that I always was, even if others couldn't see it. And that's when things started to shift. I didn't suddenly become fearless or healed, but I became aware. I became kind to myself. I started to notice when I was slipping back into old patterns, over-explaining, over-giving, overextending. And I gave myself permission to stop. Sometimes healing looks like saying, "I matter," even when no one else is saying it. Sometimes it looks like walking away without drama or revenge, just quiet dignity. Sometimes it looks like choosing solitude over the noise of someone else's half-hearted presence. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you that's been waiting to be seen, not fixed. And when you sit with it, not to judge, but to understand, that's when you begin to reclaim your wholeness. That's when you stop chasing love, because you start becoming it. Healing is such a strange, subtle thing. You expect it to feel like a breakthrough, some grand, sweeping shift that makes everything suddenly make sense. But in reality, it often looks like a quiet refusal. A moment when you feel that old ache rising, the urge to reach out, to prove your worth, to make someone stay. And you just don't. You sit with the discomfort instead. That's what it looked like for me. Tiny choices. Invisible victories. The first time I didn't answer a message out of obligation. The first time I said no and didn't explain why. The first time I let someone's silence be what it was, instead of filling it with anxious overthinking. It was hard, really hard, because I was used to giving, to being the bridge, the glue, the peacekeeper. But with every little moment of self-respect, something inside me started to change. I began to understand the power of boundaries. Not walls, not coldness, just the quiet, firm understanding that my time, my energy, my love, they're valuable. And they don't belong to anyone who treats them like an afterthought. I used to think setting boundaries would push people away. And sometimes it did. But the right ones stayed. Or rather, the wrong ones just filtered themselves out. And instead of seeing that as loss, I started to see it as clarity. One of the first boundaries I set was with myself. I would no longer beg for connection. No more chasing. No more adjusting myself to fit into spaces that felt tight, sharp, or small. If someone wasn't meeting me halfway, I stopped walking toward them. Not to punish them, but to honor me. And it's wild how that shift changes everything. When you start valuing your own energy, you become more intentional with where it goes. You stop giving it to people who leave you drained. You stop pouring it into black holes. You realize that love, real love, isn't something you have to force. I also started practicing something I never thought would matter so much: gratitude. Not the fluffy Instagram kind, but real, grounded gratitude. Every night, I'd write down 3 things I was proud of or thankful for. Some days it was just I didn't text them today. Other days, it was I spoke kindly to myself. Slowly, this practice rewired the way I saw myself. Because healing isn't just about cutting off the toxic, it's about nourishing what's true. I found myself returning to things I'd once loved but abandoned. Painting, hiking, reading for no reason other than joy. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted from. Not because they'd wronged me, but because I'd been so consumed with one-sided relationships, I had no energy left for the ones that actually cared. And with every small act of self-return, I felt more solid. Like I was no longer standing on the shaky ground of someone else's validation, but on the firm foundation of my own truth. Of course, the old wounds didn't vanish. Sometimes I still felt lonely. Sometimes I missed the comfort of what I'd let go. Sometimes I second-guessed myself. But now I met those feelings differently. I didn't let them define me. I didn't spiral. I just let them pass like weather. And they always did. I realized, too, that I wasn't broken. That none of us are. We're just carrying stories we didn't write, trying to unlearn love that came with conditions, trying to find home in a world that sometimes forgets how to hold us. But we can create that home inside ourselves. A space where we're allowed to take up room, where our feelings aren't too much, where love doesn't hurt, and boundaries don't mean rejection. They mean self-respect. A space where we're not waiting to be chosen, because we already chose ourselves. It's strange. The moment you finally choose yourself, the world doesn't explode. Nothing dramatic happens. The people who never truly saw you don't suddenly come running. You don't wake up transformed, glowing with certainty. But something inside you clicks. You exhale, and for the first time, it feels honest. That's how it was for me. No big moment. Just this quiet, almost sacred sense that I was done proving, chasing, begging. I didn't need to be louder, better, more anything to be worthy of love. I already was. And the more I settled into that truth, the less I craved what I used to. I stopped waiting for texts that never came. I stopped rereading old conversations, searching for signs. I stopped making excuses for people who were absent in the ways that mattered most. Because I realized something, when someone truly values you, you don't have to guess. You don't have to perform. You don't have to twist yourself into a softer shape just to be accepted. They see you, and they stay. But the most beautiful, unexpected thing happened before anyone else showed up. I began to see me. Not the me who tries to earn love. Not the me who hides the hard feelings. Not the me who overfunctions in silence, hoping someone will notice. I saw the real me, the one I'd been abandoning for years. And I liked her. She was softer than I thought, but stronger too. She didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to be everything to everyone. She just needed space. Space to feel, to grow, to breathe. That's when the loneliness started to feel different. Not as punishment, but as peace. Not as exile, but as return. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was building, creating, becoming. And yes, people noticed. People I hadn't heard from in years reached out. Some who once took me for granted started showing interest. The energy shifted. But by then, I wasn't moved by crumbs. I wasn't hungry for attention. I had tasted wholeness, and anything less felt hollow. You start to understand, at some point, that the love you were so desperate to receive can never be real if it costs you your own truth. And once you've chosen yourself, not just in theory, but in action, the world begins to reorganize itself around that. Better people come. Clearer boundaries hold. Peace becomes your baseline. And maybe you're not immune to pain. You still feel deeply, you still long, you still remember, but you're no longer defined by it. You're no longer searching for someone to complete you, because you've stopped seeing yourself as incomplete. And that's when something really beautiful happens. Love, the kind that's real, steady, whole, doesn't feel like a rescue. It feels like a meeting. Two people, already full, already whole, choosing to walk side by side. But you don't even need that to feel fulfilled, because you've become the person you were waiting for. That's the truth I carry now, not as a slogan, but as a lived, quiet knowing. I am enough. Not because someone finally told me so, but because I stopped needing them to. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.